Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's edition of Couch Coding, Local Development. Your experts for today are Matt Cheney, co-founder here at Pantheon, along with David Needham, our agency and community training manager. Just a few housekeeping items to go over before we start. Please make sure you submit any questions you have during the presentation in the question window. We want to answer as many of your questions during the presentation as possible, so keep those coming. Also, the session will be recorded, and the recording will be made available to everyone later this week. I'd now like to turn it over to Matt and David.
Hello, everyone. Welcome, of course, to some couch coding. This is a 45 minutes to 1 hour jam fest on a topic, as Tusa mentioned. And today's topic is going to be local development, which, when I searched on Wikipedia for local development, it defines local development as a relatively young theory in social sciences based on the identification and use of resources and endogenous potentialities of a community, neighborhood, city, municipality, or equivalent. It has 2 footnotes, but I don't actually think that makes sense. So we'll talk about not that. We'll instead talk about using a sort of local computer or sort of external thing to make and build your websites. That one of the things I think that you probably all have been checking out if you're on this couch coding is Pantheon. Pantheon, of course, is a web management platform in the cloud. We have dev, we have test, we have live, we have multi-dev, we have like elastic hosting, local dev tools, all of this stuff. But one of the key pieces, and I think David probably agree with me here, one of the key pieces that we're missing is sort of like the place or the system where you actually do your development. That we did a survey of some developers not too long ago. We asked them how do they do their development, and something like 20% said they do sort of a online local development using our SFTP mode. 80% said they had some other solution they used to connect to do local development. And I think this couch coding is sort of to try to show off a few different solutions. So there's a Drupal VM solution, there's a Cloud9 IO solution, there's SFTP mounted mode solution, we have MAMP Pro, Kalabox, some homebrew setup on your own computer, and a bunch of other solutions. So David and I have a few demos prepared just to kick it off. These are just a couple ways to local development you might be interested in, stuff we've seen as part of our work and stuff that we've seen sort of agencies and people we've worked to or run across in the park or whatever to talk about. And then we're going to definitely take questions. So we're curious sort of people's experiences, good and bad, using local development, what's worked, what do you like, what don't you like, we can sort of read those off as long as we have sort of time. But I think sort of to throw it over to David here, one of the ways that I think we're really into sort of using local development is to actually try to use our sort of SFTP mode and rock it on Pantheon. So I'll turn it over to David to show you some techniques that he's used to do local development that way.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. I'm pretty excited about the way that Pantheon handles SFTP. I think traditionally SFTP has had sort of a negative connotation. It feels like you're not a good developer if you use SFTP, and I really think the reason for that is because of the idea that if they're using SFTP, they're probably changing files directly on the server. They're probably doing cowboy coding and changing things directly on live. And that's obviously not a good practice. But the way that Pantheon has it set up, let me switch over to the environment here, is that you can actually use SFTP or Git. And SFTP is still has the version control, the commits, the history, everything that's associated with Git. Because of the way that Pantheon handles that. So when you make changes in SFTP, they show up in here, you still have to commit them, and then you have the entire commit log, whether it was created by Git in your local environment or in a build process or whatever, or through SFTP. So the best practices associated with Git are still they still exist there for SFTP.
Yeah, David, I would say I think this is actually a mistake we made at Pantheon in terms of how we call these two things, because it's not really Git or SFTP. Both of them have Git. It's simply a question of is it external Git on your actual computer, or is it like internal Git on Pantheon? It's like on server Git or local Git. And I think that's where it trips people up because they're like, of course we should use Git, so we use the Git button. But the SFTP button also is Git, which is just, I think, sort of bad UI, and hopefully we'll change that one day. But it's important to know it's both Git either way. It's just a question of, is it running on our servers on Pantheon or your server on your local computer?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the distinction here, though, of course, is that if you're using SFTP, you're allowing the website to write directly to the code, or you're connecting by SFTP to edit the code directly. And so this would be available only in the dev environment or any of the multi-dev environments that you're working in. So for the sake of this demo here, I spun up this environment, this website, D8 theming, and I installed a theme. I've set up this Pantheon sub-theme, and now I'm going to go into a multi-dev environment. And in this environment, it's just a separate environment that I've set aside just for my particular changes to this theme. And if you want to connect by SFTP, it's as easy as going to the SFTP connection information. All of the information you need is right here. And you can, of course, click here to open in your default SFTP client, and it will pop open. It'll ask you for your connection information. I used SSH, so I've entered that in. And then my code base is right here. I just go into code, I go into themes, and I go into the Pantheon subtheme that I created. And this works. I think a lot of people know about this, and it works pretty well for a lot of people. But what I really wanted to show today was the option to actually mount a separate partition via SFTP, so that it really does feel like you're working with your local files. Basically, anything that you could do with your local files traditionally, any sort of compilation steps or processes that you have would continue to work because it would act like it's a local drive on your computer. So for this, there's several options you can choose from. I know Transmit has one. If you use Transmit, you can mount a local partition. In this case, I'm using CyberDuck. It's my preferred SFTP client, and they have a separate app called Mountain Duck. And with that, I can just go up here to my Mountain Duck icon. I can go to the history. This is a bookmark that I created for this particular multi-dev environment. All I have to do is connect to it. It's going to mount it, connect it, and open it right up. And so it's right here now on my local system. I could go to code. I could go into themes. And I have this Pantheon site right here, this subtheme. I'm just going to drag this into my my Sublime text, because that's what I prefer to use. And then, like I said, from here, pretend it's local. You could, have Grunt or Gulp or whatever your preferred, SAS compilation method. You can do whatever you need to do that you're used to. In this case, just to demonstrate a change, I'm just going to make some simple little thing. I'm going to change the description here. I'm going to save that, and then I don't have to think about it. Just by saving it, it's automatically re-uploading it to the website. So if I minimize this, if I go back to my website, I'll see here that I have one change that's ready to commit in the multi-dev environment. So even though I changed that locally, it just automatically synced that up to the SFTP multi-dev. I can actually click on that and see, okay, yep, it changed that one line of code and that one file. To save it here, I just write in a message. Click commit. And at this point, it's using Git to actually use the commit message, the code change, committing it into the Git repo, and then it shows up here on the bottom as unmerged, as something in the commit log here. When I'm ready to go, if this is ready to kind of merge back into the dev environment, into the master branch, it's as easy as going over to dev, and I'll be able to go into merge. And once I have it in Git mode, you can merge that into the website. So this is one example, and like I said, this should work with most traditional compilation methods, where you're working with files locally, but you don't have to worry about, using Git directly. It gives you a little bit more flexibility, I think, in how you're actually dealing with your various websites that you're changing. Another method that I've been playing with most recently, so I came to Pantheon about 6 months ago, and I got a new computer. And the worst part about getting a new computer is getting your local environment set up again. you have all these different things to install, all these packages, all these, I got to get Terminus and Drush, and I got to do Node and Homebrew, and I got to do all those different things. It's a pretty big pain. And so I started looking at other ways to do this, and I discovered Cloud9. It's kind of like a, you can't see me, but I'm saying like local development, but in air quotes, because you're working in an environment in the cloud, which gives you flexibility to do things like, I'm going to connect from this computer or my desktop, or I'm going to go into work and borrow someone else's computer and connect to my environment from there, or I'm even going to open up my tablet or my phone and my environment's there, and it's all set up exactly how I wanted it to be. So just by going to Cloud9, it has its own IDE. You can do all the compilation and things like you're used to doing. And it gives you these great environments that you can, once you've got it set up, you can actually clone. You can actually share with people. You can collaborate, and so you can say, I'm going to add Matt to this project here, and then we can work on the same file at once. We can actually be editing, kind of like Google Docs style. You can see the changes as people are making them inline. And then when you're ready to go, it's all set up for you. It's ready to go. So I could go into the command line like this. Let's say I want to flush the cache on my environment. I can run Terminus commands. Oops. I got to do Terminus. Say
so you could do this
with like
a pair programming kind of situation. If you're
exactly.
You're virtual, you don't have to sit next to each other. You could like both work on the code together.
Yeah, exactly. That was sort of a bonus feature that I hadn't originally considered, but that's definitely a use case. They actually have another plan with Code9, one of the tiers that's specifically for training and teachers. And so you could say, as a teacher, I have this environment set up for all my students. The students can then come in for free, kind of clone that environment or that workspace into their own workspace, and then they're all starting from the same spot. So if you've ever had a pain of leading a workshop or getting someone up to speed, if you're using something like Cloud9, it's as easy as cloning the environment. It literally gives you a button to clone, and then you set it up, and everything's exactly the same. Like I said, this is something I've been playing with. I'm still figuring out exactly how far it can go, but so far I've been pretty happy with it.
Awesome.
All right, I think I'm going to hand it off to Matt now.
Yeah, well, if anyone's like used Cloud9 and has some comments, definitely drop us a question or comment in the chat around it. They, of course, are a cloud solution. We are a cloud solution. We have a .io domain. We have a .io domain. So I guess that's consistent. And I would say, David, those doing the mounted local SFTP option, that seems like pretty easy, right? You just mount the disk and then you have it. Why wouldn't you use that? Why would I go through the bother of setting up some Docker containers or Homebrew or getting Vagrant and VirtualBox all rolling? Why, if I just have a directory SFTP mounted, why wouldn't I do that?
Well, I think there are some use cases where you need a little bit more than just a SFTP, just your mounted drive can give you. So like you said, if you're using Composer, if you have a maybe a nested doc root or something like that, those would be cases I think where you'd be better off doing something like what you're about to jump into.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure those actually, I mean, I feel like you could probably do nested doc root development with a local FTP or with a mounted SFTP. I mean, for me, the biggest thing I've run into with trying to do that is it's a little bit slow sometimes, because if you have to commit, it has to upload changes. And I'm working pretty fast, so that's sort of annoying. I also have problems if I try to, I sometimes don't know exactly where stuff is that I've developed before, so I just go in the root of the of all the files, and I just grep recursively for a function name that I vaguely remember writing.
Right.
And that on like the mounted SFTP, that actually can take like a long time.
That's very true. Yeah.
Which, if you're more organized than I am, maybe then you probably can get it a little bit better. But I think the speed ends up being important for people. I think some people also like to develop without internet connectivity, which I don't really think is as much of an issue before. I think people used to be like, oh, I can develop on a plane without internet, but now a lot of planes have internet anyway. Get internet at the beach, get internet at Burning Man. I mean, it's a lot of options. But
no, that's an excellent point. But both of these in regards to air quotes local development definitely require you to have an internet connection, and that's a sticking point.
And a good one too, for sure. But I'd say, as I said for our survey, it's about 20% of people do SFTP mode, which I think is a good number. And those are people doing real professional work. So, but 80% are totally committed to a local setup. And that's something I think we'll show off a few options here as well. And I think one thing I'd say, just sort of talking with people, and David and I both do a lot of trainings to different agencies and really sort of get into it with them. And everyone's got their own sort of version of this. And it's not even clear in many cases, it's a lot of inertia goes into these decisions. A lot of times it's sort of picked up, and, it's just sort of what they've done. So it's really very, very specific. It's a very personal decision for people. I think it's easier to convince them to move the hosting of their live site than it is to get them to change the way their local machine works. So a bunch of people do it a bunch of different ways. And I think one of the good things about sort of Pantheon and sort of a website management workflow is that you don't necessarily need to. People can do local development in different ways. You don't all need the same solution. At that point, you can get into a multi-dev, or you can get into a into a sort of Pantheon workflow. Great, everyone can develop differently. So I'd say we've seen a lot of different local development solutions here at Pantheon. Some of the stuff that we see sort of work out is that a lot of folks will use a sort of Vagrant image to sort of run their dev server. There's a WordPress version of this you can download to get WordPress running in a Vagrant instance, and then there's a Drupal version as well, both pretty nice projects. And basically you just get VirtualBox, get a Vagrant image, it builds the image, and then you can sort of add in different kinds of debugging tools and different kinds of other services as well. And a lot of people like this because you can sort of have a Vagrant image in a virtual instance sort of separate from the rest of your computer, and you can easily add things like Redis or Varnish or something that would be important to sort of to have, because that's what Pantheon environments have. One of the keys, of course, for development is you want to have as close to production parity as possible. So what you don't want to do is if you're using Redis for all of your storage on your live site and then not have Redis on your local environment, because there could be an issue with how Redis works that you're just not going to ever see until it's about ready to go live or whatever. So
yeah. So personally, I always felt one of the reasons I liked using a VM is because I'm not a DevOps guy, and setting up a VM and going through the process of using it for my local development kind of forced me to learn a little bit more about good best practices for server kind of ongoing maintenance and installing things and getting everything set up properly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I do a lot of DevOps, but I still think having a separation of concerns from your development environment from your local computer itself, I think is actually really healthy. One thing that I do see people do, and if you're happy with it, I mean, I wouldn't, that's cool. But trying to use the sort of homebrew, or use your sort of native web server and native PHP and stuff on your actual computer itself. Because one thing that I've seen, especially with Macs, is that when you upgrade new versions of of Mac OS, it'll actually sometimes bump your version numbers of PHP, bump your web server, and that like you end up sort of playing sysadmin a lot just to try to like keep your local development stuff in sync. And I think especially when you start adding complexity to it, like adding Redis, adding Varnish, adding Solr, adding Xdebug, you know, in some cases it's easier to have it in a little sort of like VM over here, so you don't have to have it running on your normal computer. I think that's actually very important in cases where you, especially if you don't have like a new top-of-the-line MacBook with like the weird touchy thing at the top that some people have.
He may be sitting next to that right now.
Yeah. Well, because the thing is like local development, you could have a pretty memory-intensive setup. Like if you have Redis and you have Solr and you have Varnish and you have Nginx and you have PHP and you have MySQL and you have like a bunch of, you know, debugging stuff all running in your environment, like that can take a lot of power off your computer. It can drain your battery life when you're like doing other stuff than coding. And if you have a VM or something, you can spin it down, of course, very easily. So that's sort of my pitch for that. The other stuff that we see is there is this MAMP solution that's definitely, you know, probably one of the oldest one, very traditional, has the elephant logo. Slow, methodical, strong. And that's, you know, a lot of people use this. It's pretty straightforward to use. One of the downsides, though, of it is that it sort of only does PHP. There's a WAMP as well for Windows, and it doesn't really sort of. It's hard to expand that to try to like deal with other use cases, and it's also yeah. Plus the elephant's a little bit disconcerting. But the solution that I use, which we sort of like have a lot of people at Pantheon that are pretty into, is this Kalabox solution, which is just sort of a Docker container-based solution. So I would say in general at Pantheon we're very pro containers as a way to organize your sort of servers and development life and production life. And Kalabox is sort of basically takes Docker containers and it organizes them on your computer to actually be able to do sort of development. So it's also free and open source, which is sort of ground stakes for a lot of stuff that we'd recommend here. And what's cool about Calbox, some folks here probably have used this. We'd be curious on your opinions of it. There's good and bad to it for sure. I think the reason I really like it is that it has Pantheon integration in it. That you sort of boot it up, looks like this. So looks sort of similar to what you're used to in the Pantheon world. And if you want to add a new site, you can actually go in and like pick, you know, you can add your different accounts that are set up. You just add a machine token up here for authentication. You hit add, click on the name of your site, and then it's actually going to go out using Terminus and actually get a list of all of the different stuff over here. And then what you can do is you can say, okay, great, I'm going to go, you know, grab a copy of this site, and it'll actually go and ping Pantheon. It'll sort of figure out like, okay, you know, what environment or multi-dev environment is available, and you can say, okay, I want to download it. Give me the files and the database as a backup, and it'll actually go create containers. Entirely mirroring Pantheon's environment structure. It'll have an Nginx container, it'll have a MariaDB container, it'll have a PHP container based on the version of your site, and it'll sort of get that all working. So I did this one just a hot minute ago for our local development demo. This is our site right here for our local development demo. You can see at the top, dev local development demo.pantheonsite.io. But if you go into my Kalabox and I click on it, it'll be a local-development-demo-kbox. And so, you know, with doing nothing more than just like, you know, clicking download, I can actually go in and get that demo. And
hey, I have a bit of a confession. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I did not know that you could actually click on the site, like the graphic, to actually make it appear. I've always went into connection info and copy and pasted the URL from there. So that's great.
Oh, well, connection info does have a lot of other stuff. Like one of the things that when you're doing local development. So one other thing is that doing varnish cache development can be a little tricky. By default, the Kalabox actually doesn't go through varnish, but if you do want to go through varnish with either HTTPS or HTTP, here's the links for them right here. And this is the kind of thing where it's like I've had plenty of problems where, you know, my varnish doesn't work or something doesn't work with HTTPS or not HTTPS, and those are like sort of hard to debug if all you have is a local copy with no HTTPS and no varnish. Having like four different options to test it all is a pretty good plan. But yeah, usually it has a picture on it. That's how I learned to click on it, because I'm like, click on the picture. But the other thing, and I think this is probably like, for local development, sort of like thing number one that really is annoying is that you want to refresh your local development pretty regularly, which is to say you want to like download the latest database and files from your like site. And that can be sort of a pain. Like if you're used to doing this, you're like having to like go to the live site, do an export, like download that database file, like then type MySQL plus like your credentials plus your database name, like pipe in the like SQL file, forget that you didn't like un-gzip it, go back and un-gzip it, then type it all again, and then like it'll connect, and you have to go in and like get your files and like try to like download your files, and you have a directory, you copy a directory, then you have to like move it out of that root directory, then you have like overwrites, and it's just like it can take a lot of time. And if you're good at it, it's like faster. But one of the cool things about having a sort of container solution with more scripting is that you can say, look, like if I want to go in and get a new copy of my database, I can just hit pull, and I can say, okay, cool, let me go grab my live database right from my site. And it sort of has this user's caution because it is pulling like the actual live from the live data, so it could slow down the live site a little bit. But you could also, you know, pull the latest dev site, or if you've done a recent test site, you can do test site. And you can actually get it all in one click. And this is where like I think this stuff can be really, really fast for you, because you're like, okay, cool, I'll just go refresh my database. And that is what you're doing. And so that's something I think that ends up being a lot of makes it easier to do that kind of development. You also have a situation where if you want to actually do a commit, maybe you've done some development, like so we could go in and on a site we just downloaded, we can go get a little terminal connection, look at it, you know, hey, we've got a bunch of our stuff, here's some modules. So we could go add something here or whatever, or get rid of this weird GZ file that somehow got put in here, probably by me. And I can do a, you know, git remove that file. And then what I can do is I can actually say, okay, I want to remove that file, and I also probably want to remove that file. And then I can actually go ahead and I could even push that commit up. So I can be like, you know, removing, you know, random module files. And I can actually hit commit, and this will actually commit those changes in Git on my local, and then push it back up to Pantheon, which is pretty cool. So you don't even have to like deal with a lot of the Git syntax, you just work it out that way. You also have the option, which is also sort of important, is that sometimes you actually are doing like database changes on your local computer. Like it's a site that hasn't gone live yet, you're just working on it, you've like changed some stuff. And if you want to do it, you can sort of do push database to dev and push files, and this will actually overwrite your situation. And you can actually push your local database up over your dev or your dev environment. So that's a nice thing to do. Instead of having to like dump the database in your local and like move it up to like figure out how to get it to the server, you can just go ahead and do it that way. And it's cool because like, you know, you end up having little pictures for your sites, which like shouldn't be like, you know, if you're using Pantheon, you already sort of have that. You can easily like pull and push your code, which like seems pretty easy. And like, you know, if you're sort of over it and you're like, okay, cool, I'll go delete, you know, my instance, and I can actually just go get rid of each of these things really easily, because it's all containers, so it's easy to spin up and it's easy to spin down, and you can sort of manage it all that way. As I said, it's all Docker, so you are running Docker up here. You've got, you know, various things going on, so that's sort of the jam.
Hey Matt, one of the things that I really like about using Kalabox for training is that you never really know where people are at when they join a training. You know, you could have some like hardcore developers, and you could have some people that are not super comfortable in the command line in the same room. And so, you know, the thing about Kalabox is that, you know, you could go to the command line and you could run all of the commands from there. You know, you don't have to use the UI at all. You can just run, you know, Kbox, blah, 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 and go through and, you know, commit your code directly from the command line, and that works. Or, you know, if you're not familiar with the command line, if it's not your comfortable place, then you can just open up the code folder that Kalabox gives you for your site, make changes directly from there, and then just use the Kalabox interface to commit the code and push it up. So there's really no, you know, you don't have to do it all one way or do it all the other way. You can kind of mix and match or do whatever way is most comfortable for you.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point, David. Like, I can just hit code, like he said. This is my code right here, and you know, I can go decide, okay, great. Like, let me go open that with Sublime Text, and now I'm like doing development right here. I can get it. I can do a refresh and see my stuff. And so that's like, so that's a cool sort of thing to check out. It's definitely something we recommend. But I say under the hood, it's just Docker and Terminus. Like, they've done the work of trying to wire it all together, which is a considerable amount of work, by the way. But if maybe you don't like the Kalabox because like they use a bunch of Star Trek references in their documentation, and you're like, I like Star Wars more because in Star Trek they're just working for the state for no money, and in Star Wars you're like fighting the noble flight against the Empire, then okay, you might want to try something different. And one thing that I would sort of say is the thing that's, if you're looking to sort of really sort of make this all work, this pull operation where I'm pulling the local database. This is something that you can actually set up a script to do on your own instance. You want to do this in your Vagrant box. You want to do this on your homebrew. You want to do this. You have a dev server maybe set up in like DigitalOcean. You could actually set this up because all Kalabox is doing when you hit pull local development is it's running a Terminus command called backup, and then it's going to go do a backup list. So it's just going to show you a list of the backups on the site. So I can say Terminus backup list, and then the name of the site is local development demo dev. And I think it's actually getting it back in a JSON format. So you actually can, when you run Terminus commands, you can actually specify what kind of format you want. And so if you're writing a script, for example, you might want to do something like this. Do a Terminus backup list command, and then maybe what you want to do is then loop through the JSON, and then what you want to do is a Terminus backup get command, where you are looking to get, let's say, this database file, and that's a local development demo.f. And assuming I got all that right, it's actually going to go in and give you a download link to this. So you can sort of see how we can make a script pretty quickly that says, give me a list of the data of the backups. If there is a backup available for database, go in and get the download link. If there is not a download link available, do a backup create local development demo dev, and then wait for that to be finished, and then try the whole thing again. Because when I just executed this, of course, in Terminus, what's actually happening here on my site is it's actually going in and making a backup right here. So now the backup's done, and I can go ahead and get the backup there. So like,
back in the day when I was using,
you can do it too.
I was saying, back in the day when I was using just Terminus, via Bash scripts, I think I would do it this way, but I would always start with the backup to make sure it's a one from like at this moment instead of potentially one from the night before or whenever the last backup was taken.
Yeah. And so that's, I think, if you're already using a local dev solution, you came on here, like I would give Calbox a try. if it doesn't work for you, like for a variety of reasons, aesthetics or technical or whatever, and you have your own solution, writing little Terminus scripts to like get the database, download backup and get it working will save you a lot of time, because it's way better to be like, you know, I have a script called refresh db and just run that than like try to do it each time, and that'll help your situation. So that's sort of that, I think. The last thing I wanted to sort of show is, and this is for folks that are like into Kalabox, this could be pretty helpful. So one thing that you're going to probably like learn at some point or are using is sort of using a nested doc root. And you may want to use a nested doc root because we have this really cool Terminus build plugin system that we've done to basically connect GitHub to Pantheon, and allow you to sort of use pull requests to manage your development. And so one of the things that I've set up is I've got this website, Discordian Space, that I work on, and I've gone ahead and set it up on Kalabox. But it has a nested doc root. And the reason why it has a nested doc root is that I actually am storing the code for it on GitHub. So I need to have a nested doc root because I have my composer and my Pantheon YAML and my circle files all sort of in the web root, or in the main root. Then I have a separate web directory over here that contains my actual custom files. And so what happens is when I set up a site on Calbox, and it actually doesn't work initially because it has its web root is not set up. So I actually have to go in to my .calbox directory, into my apps directory, into Discordian Space, and actually see these are the actual files in question that actually run the different things. Then I can actually go in, you know, and start to add that web subdirectory to the Kalabox YAML, the Kalabox CLI has a web root value, and there's a few other places. And once I get that and then restart, now I actually can use local development as part of my Kalabox workflow. And then what ends up happening, which is really awesome, is I can actually go in using, you know, like development, and I can sort of say, okay, cool, I got my directory, and then I can start to do cool stuff. Like I could be like, all right, maybe I'll do a composer require Drupal Google Analytics to pull in a new module. Because part of what I'm doing also here is that I'm actually not storing like any actual modules, because those are all like generated with Composer. All I'm doing is having like this Composer file that sort of exists that tells it what to do. And then what I do is and I can use Kalabox to do other development, right? I can be like, okay, you know, let's go ahead and do more development here, make sure that all sort of works the way I want it to work. And then when I'm comfortable with it, I can go ahead and actually do a commit up to the site. And this is a commit I did earlier today, but basically what happens is when this is a commit, I added the field group module. So relatively small code change to the site. You'll see I just added field group as an included module. And then this is from my local computer, added some Composer stuff. And then there's a circle.yaml file that exists in my build process. And what that actually then goes and does is it actually says, okay, every time I've done a commit, let's first install with Composer the site. Let's push that Composer build artifact to Pantheon, and then let's merge it into the dev environment. So it actually will run through, and it'll sort of go ahead and say, okay, great, like let's go set up my site. Let's go install Terminus and Composer. Let's actually run in Composer and download all the new stuff, including that new module I just had. and then let's actually go push that code up into a multi-dev branch on Pantheon, and then let's go ahead and merge it into the dev branch right here. And so what you end up doing is that you can have a sort of local dev setup over here, and the Git remotes are actually set up directly to GitHub. So you basically have the local Kalabox pushed to GitHub. When GitHub sees a change, like Circle knows about it, and then Circle runs its kind of build process, and then that pushes it up to Pantheon, where it'll exist in the dev directory, and it'll give you something like Circle CI will commit the build assets, and then you can do dev, test it live. And so if you've been interested in playing around with sort of local dev, GitHub, Circle CI, and Pantheon all together, this is sort of a way that we're seeing people really sort of rock it, which is create a site on Kalabox, change its Git repo to GitHub, change its web root to work, push any of the code changes to GitHub, have a Circle CI solution watching GitHub. When there's commits, go ahead and do any build steps you want, and then push the changes out to dev. And then you can run it through the normal Pantheon test and live. So that's sort of a newer thing. We'll be blogging more about this, and there'll be more sort of Kalabox documentation around it. But this is sort of, something we want to show off and just let people know what's going on. But in general, we think there's a lot of ways to do local development. People probably have tried a few in their day. David had a few things. I had a few things just to show you off for the couch coding. But now we're totally into taking questions. And just sort of put them in the chat. Atusa will ask them, and then David or I will try our best to answer them. But in general, of course, let's get into it.
All right, guys, jumping right in. The first question is, are you aware of any free options for mounting SFTP?
Yeah.
I'm not off the top of my head. The two most popular ones that I've seen have been Mountain Duck and Transmit. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's something out there that's,
yeah. So
free and available.
it depends. So the two David mentioned are definitely they have good UIs and work out pretty nicely. There is this nice DigitalOcean article where they're talking about using SSHFS, which is open source, to do it. If you're on Linux or Mac, you can sort of use. They've got some tooling there. And then in Windows, you sort of can do it this way. And this is all, you have to do a little, it's a command line kind of thing. It doesn't have a GUI, but these will actually do, set this up. It'll actually, in fact, permanently set these up so you can always have your stuff doing. So I would check out the SSHFS stuff for a free and open source version. Although the GUI clients do make it a lot easier for sure. Some of them have, I think Transmit has a 30-day trial, so you could check out and see how it works as well.
All right, next question. Is there a way to use Calbox with a nested doc root, such as when using the Pantheon drops 8 example repository?
Yeah, so that was probably asked before I showed that off. So right now, Kalabox doesn't formally support this, but what you can do to use a nested doc root with Kalabox is you can spin up a Pantheon site, you can change the Git remote to be the Git to connect to GitHub, and then you can go in to the .Kalabox apps directory for your site and basically, modify a bunch of values that are for web root, and that'll actually then boot it up in a web root. In order to do this, there's an issue on the Kalabox. All the Kalibak stuff happens in GitHub, by the way. So there's there's an issue for it here, which actually has some folks who have sort of talked about what files to do. This is a feature that Kalabox is obviously working on as well. So in the future, I'm sure it'll be a lot easier. But it's definitely something that you can do sort of in your own way. It's also sort of cool because if you hack up a .apps file on Kalabox, it doesn't really, like, you can then just delete it and start over. Like, you're not like messing up your system's configuration. You're just changing Docker configurations that are easy enough to change.
One note on the last question, on the previous one, one of our viewers and good partners, Brian Thompson, just sent an answer. There's a Terminus mount plugin which will do the SSHFS mounting for you. It's on GitHub. I will send that link to all of you right now in the questions area. So you should also be getting that, and Matt is also pulling that up on his screen. Yeah. Thank you, Brian, for that. Moving on to the next question. Is the terminal on Calbox connecting to the containers or the local sync?
That looks cool. I've not seen this. So yeah, so definitely for the SFTP mount, this is a cool thing to check out. And Terminus plugins are a really nice way to sort of extend Terminus. You basically just, in your Terminus directory, you just create plugins, and then you can actually go in and just get new plugins. Then you just get new commands. So you get a Terminus mount command in this case. You can also, like, there's one to do Composer, one to do secrets management, the build tools, stuff like that. Okay, so the next question is, so one of the things with Kalabox that is really important is that when I go ahead and open this code directory, this is actually technically not the code that's running the website. This is actually a local sort of mirror of it. There's this thing that runs on the back end from Macintosh that will actually sync the code in between. And that runs really quickly typically. So if you make a change, it'll like move over to the actual container really quickly. But when you hit code, this is actually just sitting on your local, and then it actually syncs into the Docker container using a technology called sync thing. It doesn't connect directly to the container, but typically this is okay because because it's just a local file thing. It works really quickly.
All right, next question. Could I first clone my dev environment, then pull that environment for a local site?
Yeah. You could definitely clone your dev environment, and then, once you have that dev environment cloned, if you hit pull again, it'll just do the same thing because it'll just pull the database and files again. But the idea is that maybe, like, in the future, someone else will have changed the dev environment, or you'll have, move some stuff from live down to dev, and then you can pull again. That'll like refresh your dev.
Another very important question related to Terminus. Did you guys get the name Terminus from The Walking Dead?
From The Walking Dead? No. I mean, there's a few origin stories for Terminus. One is that it was supposed to be sort of a hub of different things that are connected. I personally like, if you've read any Isaac Asimov, there's this planet called Terminus, which is like the center of like the second galactic empire that is like destined for greatness. So I think that sort of is a good situation. But
see, I thought it was for the Roman deity who protected boundary markers.
Oh yeah, that actually also would be very consistent with the Pantheon. There's also a cafe near our office in San Francisco called Terminus.
Is there really?
So yeah, it's like right down the street.
Huh. Well, we learn something new every day. Going on to an almost equally relevant question, is this config for using a web root in Calbox documented on Pantheon Anywhere?
No, it's not documented on Pantheon Anywhere. It is documented on the Kalibak GitHub, and it's something they're working to sort of put more formal support and documentation around.
Next question, would all that GitHub/Circle CI setup work on GetLab, and it's built in GetLab runner infrastructure?
Yeah, so this would totally work on GetLab as well. I mean, the sort of magic that you're doing in Kalabox is you're just changing where the remote goes. You're just changing the Git situation. So once you change the Git on Kalabox to point at GetLab or at Bitbucket or something, then that will fire off all of the different all their different stuff. It'll work no problem. That's one of the cool things about having a solution like Calbox or rolling your own, in that you can connect it to whatever you want, and then that can connect to Pantheon. It's just one piece of the larger puzzle.
All right. The next question is, I don't have a Mac. Windows is a pain. Is it possible to use C9.io for running Kalabox for local development?
Well, you can't use it for Calbox directly, because it's basically like Ubuntu. And I don't think you can actually run like applications, graphical applications from Cloud9. But you could totally go into Cloud9 and have a lot of the things that that Kalabox does for you. You can certainly set up Terminus and have all of your local development stuff running there. You just wouldn't get the graphical interface.
All right, thank you, David. The next question is, can you share or recommend a source for a properly configured circle.yaml file?
Yeah, if you're into sort of setting up circle files, I would absolutely recommend this thing. It's called the Terminus Build Tools plugin, developed by our colleague Greg Anderson, who it's a Terminus plugin. So you install it in Terminus, and then you give it a circle and a GitHub token and a Pantheon token. It'll actually set up a Pantheon to circle to our GitHub to circle to Pantheon workflow. And then you can extend that for local development by just having local development talk to GitHub, and then the GitHub talks to Circle, and the Circle talks to Pantheon.
Yeah, and there is a docs page that walks through this process as well, and we'll be sure to send that out.
Perfect. Completely unrelated to anything about this, Matt Cheney, I believe this is for you. What type of desktop background are you using?
Desktop background music. Oh yeah, this is cool. This is someone I went to college with has this thing called Magic Window. So you can actually, it has a bunch of different play modes and different scenes that you can do. So you can, he has a bunch of like time release pictures, and it like has cool like effects and stuff. Takes a little bit of RAM, but can help me make it a little bit happy. I can go to the beach and stuff if I want.
Well, now that we have that out of the way, next question is there a roadmap for integrating Calbox with Terminus's new Terminus Build Tools plugin, GitHub PR workflow?
Yeah, so there is a roadmap to do it. We were chatting with the Calbox team a couple weeks ago here in this room, in fact, that the two are at the Pantheon HQ, and they're sort of getting into it. I think as with a lot of things in this kind of world, people end up sort of making plugins or doing modifications sort of and figuring out a good way to do it, and then it gets more formally codified. It is a little bit of manual work to do the GitHub integration with Kalabox, but it's way less work than setting it up all yourself. So more truth, beauty, and wisdom for you.
Awesome. Next question is, when I use GitHub and Circle CI to push to dev, then how can I pull from dev or test in Pantheon? Are there two GitHub repos in my git config in the local development?
Yeah, so the way the GitHub integration works that Greg Anderson made is you just have Kalabox connect to GitHub, and then when GitHub gets the commit, it actually it has credentials to connect to Pantheon. It will actually go commit to Pantheon on your behalf. And Greg also wrote something, so if you for some reason do use an SFTP mode on Pantheon and make a commit there, it'll then push it back to GitHub as well. So it actually is sort of synchronized that way. But you end up with just one Git remote on your site that connects to GitHub. GitHub then builds it, connects to Circle, Circle connects to Pantheon.
I want to take, I think, one more question here before we have to sign off, and that is, what is the best thing to do with the media file/folder when working in Windows? It's a link that NTFS doesn't seem to like, so I just have to ignore the fact that I replaced it on every commit.
All right. Let's see. So the question is, so one of the things for Windows, Windows has a lot of cool development tools. you end up needing Windows 10 with their sort of like Windows 10 Pro to run Kalabox and to do use the Linux subsystem. And sometimes you do run into quirks. So in this case, the folks asking, when the media module gets installed, it puts a lot of folder stuff in there, and I guess there's a link that and the NTFS doesn't like, so you have to ignore it. And I think that's I don't have any specific recommendation on how to proceed with that, but sometimes with weird stuff on your local, if you just ignore it and move on with it, if it doesn't block you, great, and go from there. But there's local development can be really weird. It's sort of like you become your own system admin, and I think, I would say if you're running into some issues with it, figuring it out, going through it is good. But I think one thing hopefully you can sort of keep in mind is at least you don't have to be doing the same kind of system admin tinkering with your client's production environment. That, in the old days, you had to develop all this stuff on your own, you had to configure it all. And I think if you're already using Pantheon or a website management system to use, dev test live, the amount of sysadmin tinkering you have to do is way less. So, if you want to get into that, local development's a good place to flex a little bit of your DevOps chops, but not in a way that's going to be mission critical for your clients. And hopefully that gives you some better sleep at night.
Alrighty, guys, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, please visit our website where you'll find a contact us page, and we'll put you in touch with the best member of our team. And be sure to join us for our next edition of Couch Coding in June. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.